The Ukrainians are putting up a mighty struggle of resistance to the invasion by the Russian communists. Let's pray they succeed. Remember, belligerence, invasion and terror are pretty much the only skills communism has ever perfected.
I've been collecting stories that are told in the Soviet Union by their people among themselves, which reveal they've got a great sense of humor, but they've also got a pretty cynical attitude toward their system. And I told this one, Bill, you'll have to hear it again. I told it in the car. I didn't tell this one to Gorbachev. You know, there's a 10-year delay in the Soviet Union of delivery of an automobile. And only 1 out of 7 families in the Soviet Union own automobiles. There's a 10-year wait. And you go through quite a process when you're ready to buy, and then you put up the money in advance. And this happened to a fella, and this is their story that they tell, this joke. That this man, he laid down his money, and then the fella that was in charge said to him, okay, come back in 10 years and get your car. And he said, morning or afternoon? And the fellow behind the counter said, well, 10 years from now, what difference does it make? And he said, well, the plumber's coming in the morning.
Well, in the good old days, we used to be able to laugh at communism. Its ineptitude, its shoddy workmanship, its empty shelves, its ugliness and misery. But in so many ways, thanks to the relentless degrowth agenda of the green climate change cult, embraced by our politicians, our banks and our business leaders, shutting down our coal-fired power stations, defunding our energy investments, and the long march of the neo-Marxists through our education and legal institutions wreaking havoc with our culture. The joke is now firmly on us. Russia is now so unafraid of the European Union, as we were just discussing with Michael Schellenberg, and America under Biden, that it marches into Ukraine with apparent impunity, much as China may well be planning to do to Taiwan. Maybe we should all start learning Russian now, or why not Mandarin, as the New South Wales Labor leader Chris Minns once advocated. Labor leader Minns has now rapidly retreated from that suggestion, which popped into his head apparently after an all-expenses-paid trip to communist China, funded by the Communist Party through the now exiled communist Chinese billionaire Huang Jingmo. The same bloke who has now been booted out of the country, but not before he managed to give the New South Wales Labor Party a plastic bag stuffed with a lazy $100 grand. And pay $44,000 worth of Labor Senator Sam Dastyari's legal bills for him. Nice. Oh, and Huang also owes you and me around $140 million in unpaid taxes. But what's a few $100 million between communists, I always say? What is it about the left, the modern left, so eagerly hopping into bed with totalitarians, authoritarians, and communists? Oh, that's right. It's because lots of lefties are, in fact, communists, totalitarians, and authoritarians. Silly me. At heart, communists and the 3 Ls, left-wingers, lovies, and Labour, all believe in essentially the same proposition, that we everyday ordinary folk can't be trusted to organise our own lives, so they, and the party, will organise our lives for us. This they decide to do for the common good. But this, in turn, can only ever be done if the left controls as much of our lives as they possibly can, including how much money we have, where we are allowed to go, what we're allowed to say, and ultimately, what we can think, where on earth we can live, what sort of homes we can live in. And if we happen to disagree with them or resist what they are doing for the common good, well, that's when things turn commonly ugly. We saw examples of this sort of overtly authoritarian left-wing approach during COVID, right here in Australia.
Excuse me, what on earth?
Just put your phone down.
Can you record
to...
this? I'm in my pajamas.
What's
I
this?
have an ultrasound in an hour.
Yeah, she's pregnant. Media! Media! Media!
Stop! Get the hey! What are you doing? You just kicked your choking me, girl! What the
I will never stop playing that footage, and let me remind you, none of that did anything to save anyone's life or to help any medical situation. Pure left-wing authoritarianism. In fact, as shocking as that footage was to those of us born and raised in Australia, it was even more terrifying to those Australians who actually lived under and then fled communism because they thought they'd escaped it. They are the ones who are really terrified, and we should be listening to them. Those Australians who escaped from Mao's China, from Vietnam, from any number of countries that were once behind the Iron Curtain. Zechary Pelushi was born in the People's Socialist Republic of Albania 70 years ago today, as it happens, back when Albania was under the iron grip of the murderous and ruthless dictator Enver Hoxha, under whose caring and compassionate rule thousands of Albanians were executed and tens of thousands more imprisoned in forced labour camps. But when communism began falling apart, Zechary Pelushi helped set up the Democratic Party, the first opposition party in Albania, after more than 45 years of communist dictatorship. And almost 30 years ago this month, the Democratic Party successfully tipped the communists out of power. Zechary even became a chief advisor to the new Democratic Prime Minister. But by 1994, rampant corruption had replaced communism, as it nearly always does throughout the communist world. And after receiving death threats, Zechary and his family moved to Australia, becoming political exiles. From being at the top of society in Albania, Zechary and his wife started all over again in Australia as cleaners. Like so many migrants to this country, theirs is a wonderful success story. Zechary learned English, restudied medicine, went on to become an award-winning GP with a wonderful Australian family. And I'm pleased to say Zechary is an avid fan of this show, Outsiders. Happy birthday, mate. There are many, many thousands of Australians who fled communism and totalitarianism to build free lives here. And many of those same individuals are now worried that history is repeating itself. But sadly, history is not really repeating itself, because never before in history has the West been so stupid, so short-sighted, so myopic, and so moronic as to deliberately destroy its own energy superiority, trash its own culture, and jeopardize its own economic and industrial future. Never before in history have the enemies of democracy faced an opponent riddled with the feebleness of political correctness, the self-hatred, the moral cowardice, and a grim determination to destroy the great Enlightenment heritage we've all benefited from. As I said last week, peace comes through strength, strength comes through energy, and energy comes from coal and gas. With sanctimonious dimwits like billionaire Mike Cannon Brooks not only going soft on the Russians, but also promising to buy up our coal-fired power plants in order to shut them down, with half-wits like Anthony Albanese and Adam Bandt eagerly pursuing climate degrowth policies, with billionaires backing phony independence through Climate 200 at the forthcoming election, with treacherous Liberals spruiking their mates' investments in woefully inadequate and subsidised renewables. No wonder socialists are rubbing their hands with glee.